A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all to this news analysis initiative. These are the articles that are important from today's newspaper. Without any further delay, we will move on to the first one. The first article for the day, Intergrid linked to NPR with details of 119 crore residents. Now, what is NatGrid and why was it created? NatGrid is a secure digital platform used by police and intelligence agency. It was conceptualized after the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks and it was made operational only last year after long delays. And this is designed to help agencies quickly access data from multiple government and private databases. And what does linking NatGrid with NPR mean? The NPR stores family-wise information collected during the 2011 census and it was last updated in 2015. By linking NatGrid with NPR, investigators can access details of all family members of a suspect. Data can be analyzed faster and across sources. Investigations become quicker and more coordinated. So, this link significantly increases the depth and reach of intelligence gathering. Now, the role of Gandiva. NatGrid's upgraded tool called Gandiva plays a key role. It allows multi source data collection, facial recognition, and entity resolution. That means linking different records to the same person. For example, if a suspect's photo is available, it can be matched with telecom KYC, driving license, or vehicle records. So, investigators can quickly identify and track the individuals. This saves time, manpower, and resources for law enforcement agencies. An organized crime network database is also being developed on the platform to enable secure data sharing between the National Investigation Agency and state anti-terror squads. So this shows a clear move towards technology driven policing and intelligence. Now the NPR is important here because it is a first step towards a national register of citizens. However, Census 27 has been approved and no separate allocation has been made for updating the NPR. And the government has said no decision has been taken yet on updating the NPR during the census. So this creates an uncertainty, especially since NPR data is now being actively used through NatGrid despite not being recently updated. So the larger issue here is the security versus privacy. How much data access is necessary? What safeguards exist against misuse? How is the privacy protected? See, while NatGrid is accessible only to authorized agencies and aims to improve the national security, the scale of data involved makes oversight and accountability crucial. So you can quote this example like Atal canteens and eat with dignity. Okay, you can try to quote the song. And regarding this ad, Vikshit Bharat VBG Ramji Act, that is what kind of asset will be created. These are the four focus areas. First one is the water security. Next, core rural infrastructure. Third is the livelihood infrastructure. And the fourth is the climate resilience and disaster preparedness. Okay, the next one is the unique case study which you can use in women related questions. Okay, here facing opposition, ban on use of smartphones by women withdrawn. In Rajasthan's Jalore district, village elders have withdrawn a ban on women using smartphones after facing opposition from different quarters. Now, what was the ban initially? Earlier, elders of a particular community had decided that daughters and daughters in law of 15 villages should not use smartphones. The ban was to start from January 26, that is the Republic Day. Okay, and women were allowed only keypad phones for making just phone calls. And for school going girls, smartphones could be used only inside the home and that is only for educational purposes. So, now why was the ban imposed? According to village elders, what they are telling us, according to village elders, women told them that children, after returning from school, were spending too much time on smartphones. Children were watching videos instead of eating or studying. And elders felt this could affect children's health, eyesight, and studies. So they claimed the decision was taken keeping children's welfare in mind and not to target women. Okay. Now it was withdrawn. After criticism and opposition, elders said the decision was misunderstood and they clarified that no one was forced to follow the ban and so on and so forth. You can use this in your mains answer writing. The next article for the day, a year of dissipating promises for Indian foreign policy. See, at the start of 2025, India's foreign policy looked very promising. After the 24 elections, it was expected that our policy would return to active diplomacy, finalizing big trade deals, improving ties with major powers, and stabilizing India's neighborhood. But by the end of the year, most of these expectations had faded. That is what this article is arguing. The first is the economic and energy setbacks. The India-US relations worsened instead of improving. Under Donald Trump's second term, the US took a tough and a transactional approach. And US has imposed around 25% tariffs on Indian exports like textiles, gems and seafood. And there is stricter H1B visa rules hurting the remittances, and there are extra penalties linked to India's imports of Russian oil. So these steps affected jobs, factories and investor confidence in India. And India did sign free trade agreements with the UK, Oman and New Zealand. However, the most important deals like with the US and the European Union did not happen despite repeated promises. So that is the first one. The second aspect is the China and Russia. Strong optics, weak results. Now what is it? See, India held high profile meetings with both China and Russia and creating strong visuals. But on the ground, little has been changed. Now, with China, there was no real progress on the line of actual control. Chinese investment restrictions remained, and new incidents like the detention of Indian passengers. See, with Russia, India faced growing pressure to reduce oil imports due to US sanctions. This created a dilemma between energy security and strategic autonomy. The India Russia summit failed to produce major agreements. So, the message was clear: symbolism did not lead to security or economic gains. The third is a more unstable global order. The global environment became more uncertain in 2025. The US softened its position on China and Russia. The peace proposals on Ukraine and Gaza weakened faith in the rules based order. And China began promoting its own model of global governance. So, India's role in this US strategic thinking appeared limited. So, this raised doubts about its place in the global power balance. The fourth is the regional security challenges. Now, India's neighborhood also became more unstable. A terror attack in Kashmir showed that security threats still exist in India, and India's military response was effective, but global diplomatic support in that issue was very limited. The third is the ties worsened with countries like Turkey and Azerbaijan, and political instability increased in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Myanmar. So, by the end of 2025, India faced uncertainty on almost all sides of its neighborhood. So, on the whole, in 2026, what India needs is a realistic diplomacy, economic strength, and consistency to deal with an unstable world. The next article for the day is doping menace. One major reason India is still struggling to become a global sports power is its serious doping problem. See, for the third year in a row, India has topped the global list for doping positives according to World Anti-Doping Agency. And this is happening at a very sensitive time. Like India is set to host the 2029 World Police and Fire Games and 2030 Commonwealth Games in Ahmedabad. And it also hopes to bid for the 2036 Olympic Games. A poor anti-doping record directly damages India's credibility. The first is the scale of the problem. In 2024, India recorded 260 positive cases out of about 7,100 tests. This gives a positivity rate of 3.6%, one of the highest globally. And France and Italy were far behind in numbers. Now, India argues that higher testing leads to higher detection. But this explanation is very weak because even the percentage of positive cases remains high. And post-COVID data also shows the problem is persistent and not a temporary one. The second is the NADA's response, that is the National Anti-Doping Agency. They claim that improvement in 2025 over 7,000 tests, only 110 positive cases. So the positivity rate is reduced to 1.5%, and it shows that it has taken steps like awareness program and promoting the know your medicine app. These are positive signs, however, but ground realities remain troubling here. There are repeated reports of athletes trying to escape testing and even support staff being involved in doping. This shows that doping is not just an athlete level problem but a systemic issue within the sports ecosystem itself. Now, why athletes dope? The causes are multiple because the pressure to win due to government jobs through sports quota. The second is the large cash rewards for international medals. The third is the ignorance about the banned substances. Fourth, greed, especially among elite athletes. Even though health risks are well known, short term gains often outweigh the long term consequences. The sports ministry itself admits that incentive structures may be pushing athletes towards the shortcuts. See, India has passed the National Anti-Doping Amendment Bill 2025, strengthening the legal framework. However, laws alone are not enough, and India is under pressure from the International Olympic Committee to clean up its system. For this, now this National Anti-Doping Agency must be fully independent, not influenced by sports bodies or the government. Next, it should be better funded to keep up with rapidly advancing doping science. Without autonomy and resources, enforcement will remain very weak. The next article for the day, the urban future with cities as dynamic ecosystems. Now, cities are at the center of today's world. They drive development, policy making, science, and technology. But in all this planning and progress, we forget one basic thing: the people who live in cities. And there is a growing gap between the cities we design, the cities we dream of, and the cities people actually live in. And this gap is the missing link in modern urban development. Now, the first is the invisible tax of exclusion. When people migrate to cities, they are expected to fit in that. This expectation is often summed up as do what the locals do. The first barrier is the language. If migrants do not speak the dominant local language, they struggle to find jobs, they face difficulty in housing, they find it hard to access government services or healthcare, and this is an invisible linguistic tax paid by the migrants, and it is not written anywhere but it is real. The second one is the language as an economic barrier. Now, this linguistic exclusion directly leads to economic disadvantage. When official documents, offices, and systems work in only one language, job searches become harder, legal agreements become confusing, and welfare schemes remain out of reach. As a result, migrants are pushed into the informal economy where exploitation is common, job security is low, social mobility is limited. So, ironically, cities depend heavily on migrant labor and taxes but still deny migrants equal access to opportunities. So, this weakens the city's own long term economic and social strength. The third is the flawed assumption in urban planning. The modern urban planning assume a static and a homogeneous population, and infrastructure is designed mainly for long-term residents, people who speak the right language, and people with proper documents. Even so-called smart cities often work only for those who already belong. Now, new residents become invisible in this design itself. The fourth one is the governance. The problem is made worse when local governance bodies are not culturally diverse. When planning committees do not reflect the city's real population, what happens is schools are poorly planned, transport systems miss the actual needs, the public spaces fail to serve everyone. So, homogeneous thinking is used to plan heterogeneous cities. So, what should be the way forward? So, the future cities should be layered and flexible. Better roads and buildings alone are not enough because cities are living systems, not the fixed blueprints. So the planners must accept the diversity and it is going to increase further, and we have to anticipate those kind of cultural frictions that is going to happen, and we need to make the system to manage this in future. See, the urban future that this article talks about is a city should be designed and governed for those who are born in the city and those who have arrived years ago and those who will arrive tomorrow. Okay, so this is the missing link in the current cities, and the future urban should have all these three things linked together. See the next article for the day, US blockade on Venezuelan oil tankers. Now what happened? US President Donald Trump announced a total complete blockade of oil tankers linked to sanctioned Venezuelan oil trade. The aim is to cut off Venezuela's oil revenue and which supports the Maduro government. Okay, and currently which three ships faced US action is Skipper, the next one is the Centuries, and the third is Bella 1. Okay, now what are US sanctions? See, UN sanctions, that is United Nations sanctions, are international and they are legally binding. Whereas United States of America's sanctions are unilateral and they are enforced using control over the US dollar, global banking system, and trade access to US markets. How does the US enforce shipping sanctions? See, shipping needs insurance. Mostly they are Western or UK based. The next one is the classification certificates, and it is also based on the membership. Once a particular thing is being sanctioned, then the insurance is withdrawn. The certifications are cancelled. Flag states may deregister the ships. Then there is a term known as shadow fleet. See, shadow fleet means those ships that operate with fake or unclear flags and they have weak insurers and they are non-IACS classification societies, and it is usually used by Russia, Iran, Venezuela to bypass the sanctions imposed by US. The next article for the day, Indian Army relaxes social media policy, allows passive participation. See, the Indian Army has slightly relaxed its strict social media rules, but only in a very limited and in a controlled manner. See, earlier, Army personnel were told to completely delete accounts like Facebook and Instagram because of security risk. Now, the Army has allowed passive use of some platforms. What does that mean now? Now, Army personnel can only view content on platforms like Instagram, X, YouTube, and Quora, and they cannot post, comment, like, share, react, or message anyone. Even a simple reaction in any post is not allowed. Instagram has now been officially added to the restricted use list, meaning it can be watched but not used actively. And for messaging apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, and Skype, limited use is allowed only for general and non-sensitive information and only with known contacts. The responsibility of verifying who they are talking to lies fully with the user itself. And LinkedIn app is only allowed for professional purposes like uploading a resume or job related networking. And the army has also clearly warned personnel to stay away from pirated software websites, torrent and VPN services, anonymous chat rooms, suspicious file sharing platforms, and unsafe cloud storage. So the main idea here is information can be seen but nothing can be shared. The next article for the day, carrying the red flag into the next century. See, on December 26, 2025, that is today, the Communist Party of India completes 100 years. And this is not just the anniversary of a political party. It is a moment to pause and reflect on a movement that shaped India's freedom struggle, its constitution, and its idea of social justice. The CPI did not ask only one question, how do we get freedom? It actually asked a deeper one, like freedom for whom and for what purpose? The CPI was born in 1925 in Kanpur under British colonial rule, and this was a time when India was crushed by imperial exploitation. Industries destroyed, peasants are impoverished, and workers were pushed into misery. Okay, And this period also produced a modern working class, trade unions, and revolutionary thinking. The slogan Inquilab Zindabad, coined by Maulana Hasrat Mohani and later it was immortalized by Bhagat Singh, that became the heartbeat of this movement. See, one of CPI's greatest contributions was building mass organizations like All India Trade Union Congress, All India Kisan Sabha, All India Students Federation, and cultural movements like the Progressive Writers Association. See, for this year's prelims, in modern history, this part becomes very important because it is 100 years. See the next article, 915 Maharashtra villages back dignified life for widows. This is a wonderful case study and a very inspiring one, which you can use it as an anecdote in your essays, and you can also quote as an example in your mains answer writing throughout. See, in a small village called Mazal in Nashik district, a Gram Panchayat official passed away. Like in any village, messages about his last rites were shared. But this message carried something different, something historic. It said that after his death, his wife would not be subjected to the cruel tradition of stripping a widow of her dignity. Like no wiping of vermilion, no breaking bangles, no removal of Mangal Sutra or toe rings. The family said clearly, we will not follow traditions that humiliate women. And for centuries, this practice has existed in Maharashtra, not only in Maharashtra, throughout parts of India. When a husband dies, villages gather and publicly remove everything that symbolizes marriage from a woman. In Nashik district alone, 915 villages have officially passed resolutions saying this tradition will no longer be followed. And even more powerful, over 1100 couples have signed a written pledge. The pledge is called Saubhagyashe Shapat Patra. Okay, in simple words, it says we believe in equality, dignity, and the constitution. We reject cruel and unscientific traditions. We will not allow society to strip a woman of her self respect after her husband's death. See, this movement is part of the Nav Chetana program by the Nashik Zilla Parishad, and it doesn't just oppose bad traditions, it supports widows with skill training, self-employment, loans and education for their children. It is about the empowerment. See, Maharashtra has a long history of social reform from Phule to Agarkar, and today once again villages are showing that progress don't always begin in cities. See, other important one is the Constitution of India is released in Santhali language. That is another news came in today's newspaper. The other one is FSSA has banned that herbal infusions as tea. You should not say putting like lot of herbs in boiling water, and you should not say that it is a tea. See, India will soon become self-reliant in semiconductors. This was told by our Home Minister. That is the only point that you can take from this article. And regarding this anti-terror conference, it is to be inaugurated. So once it is inaugurated and this anti-terror policy, yesterday we were seeing in news. So once that is also out, we will have a detailed discussion regarding that. See, the next article for the day is India to lead conflict-free diamond body Kimberley Process from January. Now, this decision was taken by consensus, which means all member countries agreed that itself is important. Now, what is the Kimberley Process? The Kimberley Process is a global system created to stop the trade in conflict diamonds. Okay, conflict diamonds are those diamonds that are used by rebel groups to fund wars, destabilize governments, and fuel violence, especially in parts of Africa. And the Kimberley Process works as a tripartite agreement, meaning governments, international diamond industry, civil society groups, all of them will work together. Only diamonds that are certified as conflict free can be legally traded under the system. Now, why does India's chairmanship matter? Because this is the third time India will chair the Kimberley Process, and it reflects global trust in India's role in transparent and ethical trade. And India is one of the largest diamond cutting and polishing hubs in the world. So its leadership carries weight. The next article for the day is China flays Pentagon report alleging bid to weaken US-India ties. Now, why this is important is, see, recently a Pentagon report came. Okay, and according to that report, what it says is China is allegedly using reduced border tensions with India to weaken India US relations, while at the same time they are strengthening the defense ties with Pakistan. And now China has denied this. Okay, that is the only news you can take here. And one important point is on India China border issues, what they told is the line of actual control is generally stable, and that communication channels between India and China are functioning smoothly. The last article for the day, rabies, the cruel and expensive disease of India's most impoverished. Rabies is still one of India's most serious but neglected public health problems. Every year, nearly 20,000 people in India die from rabies, making up about one third of global rabies deaths. And almost all these deaths are caused by dog bites, especially from free roaming street dogs. The disease is 100% fatal once symptoms appear, but it is also 100% preventable if treatment is taken on time. The real problem is not lack of medical knowledge, it is poor access to care. Most victims are poor and vulnerable people, daily wage workers, children, rural populations, waste pickers, and migrants. And after a dog bite, many do not get proper post exposure prophylaxis. And what is this post exposure prophylaxis? That is, it is the life saving treatment given after a dog or animal bite to stop rabies before even the symptoms start. And once rabies symptoms appear, it is almost always fatal. And so this PEP must be started immediately. And there are four major gaps. The first one is poor awareness. People don't realize rabies can occur even from small scratches or licks. Okay, the second one, poor accessibility. Nearby hospitals often lack vaccines or doctors. Third, poor availability. Shortage of anti-rabies vaccine and rabies immunoglobulin. And the fourth one is poor affordability. This RIG, rabies immunoglobulin, can cost 5,000 to 20,000 and unaffordable for most families. So because of this, many victims delay treatment, discontinue vaccines or turn to quacks, which leads to certain death. See, India also faces a huge shortage of this RIG, and which is very crucial for bleeding wounds. And even vaccines are insufficient, and India needs about 60 million vaccine doses, but it produces less, but it exports a larger share. At the source level, India has around 80 million free roaming dogs and nearly 20 million dog bites every year. Current dog control policy relies mainly on catch, neuter, vaccinate, and finally release them, and which has not been sufficient on its own. So the solution has to be multi-layered. We have to ensure immediate and free PEP for every dog bite. We have to guarantee availability of vaccines in public hospitals. We have to expand the affordable indigenous alternatives. We have to strengthen the dog population control through sterilization, vaccination, and shelters. Finally, we have to increase community awareness about wound washing and early treatment. See, overall, if you look into, the rabies is not just a medical issue, it is a failure of the public health systems. Because until care becomes accessible, affordable, and available, rabies will continue to kill silently even though it is entirely preventable. That's all for today. Thank you all for joining.